Me and Mike were friends for about 2 years. We met through a mutual friend, Paul Wilhelm. We all enjoyed fishing together, and actually knew Paul first, and then I met him, and he's just a straightforward, straight up guy, like very honest, somebody you'd want to be a friend with, because he had no ill will intentions against you or anyone else. He's just an honorable dude, and we enjoyed fishing together. We fished all the time. Uh, he looked out for me, and I looked out for him. He was one of my best friends.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so didn't you recently get married? And that's kind of how you found out that he was, you hadn't heard from him?
I did. Actually, the day I found out that I hadn't heard from him, the day before, I actually was fishing a tournament for Wounded Warriors. Um, the last day I talked to him, which was September 19th, he told me that he was going to go get his tuxedo for my wedding, and that he just had to stop at a client's house to do a service call. Well, he went to that service call, and I tried to call him an hour later to see if he made it to get the tuxedo. He didn't pick up, so I figured that he just was still working. And then the next day, my friend Paul Wilhelm, which is also one of Mike's really close best friends, he called me and said Mike's missing. And in the back of my mind, I'd known what happened because this had been going on for a long time. His doors were chained, and he was in fear for his life as well, because his doors was chained up. They were propped up, so like you were trying to keep someone out. And I think he knew what she was capable of. Well, we started searching for him. We went to Clay County PD and the sheriff's department. We went to and we got a ping on his phone through Find My iPhone app that he shared with his girlfriend. And I went to the house looking for him, which was about 3 miles from where he was actually found. And then the state police finally stepped in, and they pinged his phone location a quarter of a mile where he was found. And I passed the house a dozen times, never thought that to look at the house, or they hid the truck inside the house, and a 1-ton dually inside of a small garage. And when he went in to check the thermostat, which is one of his first things he does when he comes on a service call, and whoever, they knew that he would do that. And they kind of trapped him there, and they ended up shooting him 4 times. It's hard to talk about because what he must have been thinking. But we searched for him for a week, and he was supposed to.
You're fine. You're fine. Take the time you need. I can't imagine losing a best friend like that.
Yeah, he shouldn't have been done that way. Nothing in this world should take anybody that way. Greed it's just a bad thing. It was evil what happened. I feel bad for his kids, his grandkids, and his mom. It must be really hard on them. If it's hard on me, I can only imagine how hard it is on them. But he was a hero to U.S. He was a Navy and Army. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. This is a difficult thing, and like you were searching for him and you were helping with that search. And I know that you were very, adamant and, alerting me and our news station to him being missing. So, I mean, you were in the thick of it.
Yeah. Deep down, I'd known what was happening. We try to communicate with Clay County Sheriff's Department, and at first they kind of just shook it off. They didn't take us very serious at all. Me and my friend Paul Wilhelm actually went there and reported him, and they just kind of laughed at him because this had been going on for a while. Between him and his wife, they were going through a divorce, and the divorce was almost done with. And I don't understand why she did it. She made plenty of money. Mike was just trying to move on with his life and be happy.
So when did they get married?
They got married 2 years prior to his death.
Okay.
So about 2019, 2020, and he decided that he would move from California. He let her stay in his house in California, and he decided he would move here in the new house. And this was going to be her retirement home. They were going to overlook Bell Hollow for the rest of their life. They were going to spend that time together. And she had actually told him that she didn't want to retire just yet. She wanted to spend some more time with CHP. And he didn't like that very much, and it kind of got, it was rocket for him. I was there with him the whole time. There was red flags like before they started having problems. Like she called him one day and asked him if she'd signed the house over in her name too, but he owned the house outright. And this was in January, like months prior to this, and there was a bunch of just little red flags that I think in the end, I think he was kind of targeted. I know it sounds the way it sounds, but this happens all the time. He was kind of targeted. Like she was just taking what she could from him. He actually signed he was just trying to be a good husband. And I told him not to do it because I'd seen it 100 times. I was in the military also. And with my Marines and stuff, I'd seen it where the wives would just, they'd kind of take advantage of them, and they would just end up getting what they could get from the Marine, and then they would leave. And there's people actually do that. But this is one of those cases with Mike. He was just trying to be a good husband. He believed her, and he always looked at the best in people. And so he signed it thinking it was going to put her name on the deed as well, just, to make her happy because it's his wife. But she ended up somehow signed the deed over solely in her name. And how I found that out is he called me upset one morning saying
Which house was this? The California or Tennessee house?
It was the one in California.
Okay.
And then he accepted the fact she got his house. He accepted everything, but he told me, he wasn't worried about that. He just wanted to be over and done with. He was going to move on with his life. He knew what he'd lost, and he let it go. He let it go behind him. And he's just like it was worth looking at to move on with his life. He actually ended up getting another girlfriend. And he really, really cared about her. So that's all he talked about.
So him and Julie were kind of estranged, essentially.
Yeah, they were separated for a long time, and she would rarely come in and see him. And I just thought it was so strange how she acted in the relationship. It wasn't like a married couple would act.
How did they meet? What did they meet in California?
They did. They met in California. They actually started talking to her online.
Okay. So is Mike from Kentucky, Tennessee area?
So when he was a small child, he moved from Kentucky and Tennessee to California. And
okay.
I think he was 5 when he moved, and he decided he could come back and retire here from where he came from.
Okay, so he's a native of this area, yes. And then when he was 5, moved to California.
Yes.
And how long? So he was out there all of his adult life?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And then recently he had bought that house in Clay County?
Yes, he lived there about a year to 2 years.
Okay. So what are some of Michael's best qualities? What's some things people should know about him? What's the legacy that he leaves behind?
He's a United States veteran of the Army and the Navy. The guy was just super honest. He had no he wanted to see everyone do good in life. His integrity was just through the roof. He was a business owner, but he wasn't like most people. Mike was different from a lot of people, and I could say that, and it wouldn't mean anything to anybody. It's what everybody says, but Mike was truly just a good-hearted individual. And if I needed anything, he'd come that night and he'd help me out, and I would do the same for him. And the best thing I could do is kind of keep his memory alive. and keep it going for him because he deserves that.
You said he has kids and grandkids.
Yes, he's got a son and a daughter.
Okay.
He talked about them often. He was kind of separated from them from California, but he was proud of both of them, and I just feel so bad for them.
Why did this happen? What ultimately, what was the reasoning? Right now we don't have any confirmation that this was a murder for hire, but all of the facts are kind of lining up. So, allegedly, why did she plot this?
I think it was a money issue, and I also believe that she left a note saying that Mike, I guess you win, in the note, and I don't think Mike felt that way, but I think that she felt like it was a game, like a controlling game, and that's while he was alive, I saw it, and but I can't tell someone how to run their marriage, but I just I'm his friend, and I would never get in the way of a man's marriage, but I was worried about him.
So was it like she was trying to get his life insurance money or trying to get his business or?
Oh, yeah, she wanted everything. She actually one night during the divorce, about 3 days later, I told Mike, I said, Mike, if you want to be fair, go to the bank and get half the money out. If you want half the money, because I've seen it 100 times in the military. The wife will clean the Marine out or the service member, and they don't get half of it. Whoever gets to the bank first. And I said, and that's what he said, no, I want the courts to handle it. And I said, Mike, that's not how this works. I said, if you want to be, but again, he was just trying to be fair. And well, she came in 3 days later in the middle of the night. He said, I heard the garage door open. He walked downstairs and he said, no, there was nothing there. And then the next morning he woke up and the bank had called him and told him that Julie Harding was just here and she cleaned the banking account out.
When was that?
This was about 3 months before he passed away.
Wow.
So after that, like, he kind of freaked out, and he kind of realized, I might be in trouble. And he started chaining his doors up, the cameras, trying to lock his cameras out, lock her out from his cameras so she couldn't turn them off. He was freaking out, and I think that I wish I would have seen kind of seen how serious he was about it, because he knew at that point that what she was capable of. And she's a very intelligent woman. And she, working for the CHP, she knew how to get away with those things. And then they actually, after Mike passed away, we kind of entrusted the dog to his girlfriend because he would want her to look after Charlie. And Julie actually came back for the dog, and they were supposed to meet. We're supposed to meet up and give him the dog at the police department in Murfreesboro. She didn't want to do that, and he was supposed to meet a breeder, but the breeder didn't want to meet in front of the cameras. And I don't blame her. I wouldn't either after everything that just happened. But Julie actually got her address somehow and went to Murfreesboro and kind of stalked out her location where she lived at her home and watched her home. And one morning, while his girlfriend was taking a shower, her kids just left. And one of her kids had walked out the door. And as soon as they got on the bus, Julie got off her vehicle and walked up and opened the door of his girlfriend's house and took the dog.
That's where the trespassing charge comes from?
Yes, it's actually on camera of her doing it.
Okay. Gotcha.
And this is just, we'd all known what had happened, but we couldn't prove it. Luckily, the FBI, the state police, Kentucky State Police was involved. And I had a lot of faith that those guys could figure it out, and they did.
Now, do you know anything about this Thomas O'Donnell guy who's suspected of killing Mike?
I know he's from Texas. he moved to California. Julie knows him. The FBI found out that Julie Harding was, she knew him, but had no affiliation with Mike. So Mike would know the guy, if he saw him. And that's basically what I know about the guy. He's a gun for hire. And things like that, where we live at, it just doesn't happen. And a lot of people, they believe that this is impossible, that this isn't happening in our neighborhood. And it's been kept very quiet. Most of the time when someone passes away or becomes murdered, it gets put on blast. But this has been very, very quiet. I don't understand why, but it has been. Not a lot of information's been shared. And again, I don't know if it's because the FBI is involved or, but it's been kept very quiet, or the fact that Julie is a police officer in California. I don't know why it's been kept so quiet. But I would want everyone to know, so that if anybody had information pertaining to the murder of Mike, we could get it solved. But I just wish this turned out differently.
Yeah. So, I mean, so essentially what you're suspecting, and what, the close friends around Mike are suspecting, is that Julie, had all the involvement in his murder.
Yes. I believe, and we all believe, that she had Mike murdered, hired a guy to have Mike murdered, that he wouldn't know, that he would suspect. And I believe it was months planning the process, because I believe that the guy acted like a realtor. Found a house for sale that was empty for a while, and planned it from there. He called Mike for a service call. Mike came out there for the service call because he told me that's where he was going. He said it was in Burkesville, Kentucky. And when he got there, the first thing Mike would do, and she probably, told him this, Thomas, that he would go in and check the thermostat. Well, he did just that. And when he went in, Thomas shot him 4 times with a 45 caliber pistol. He shot him twice in the chest, and once in the neck, and then once in the head.
Goodness. So Mike what was his business? It was, service stuff.
Yes, it was Mike's around the clock heating and air.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. I'm trying to think if there's any more questions on one last question. So back in September, when he was reported missing, I know that you had shared with me a surveillance footage of his truck. That was in Burkesville, correct? Where he was last seen?
Yes.
Okay.
That was on the way to that was from a car lot on the way to the client's house. That was a few miles from it was like 2 miles from the client's house.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Well, Preston, is there anything else that you would like to add? I appreciate you, being vulnerable and speaking to me, and, talking about Mike's legacy.
That's about it. I just wanted to see justice for Mike, and he was a good man.